Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review, we are looking at the new Marvel Legends X-Men's Marvel's The Blob, which is part of the 60 years of X-Men, I guess, thing. I don't know. And it's a deluxe figure, according to Hasbro. It comes in at a price point just shy of 60 bucks. And that's pretty stinking high for a single release Marvel Legends figure. Is it worth it? We're going to find out by the end of the review. We'll do a little bit of comparing here and there. We're going to get into the nitty gritty. So let's go ahead and get this guy off the stand and take a closer look. I have to do this. I didn't even plan on doing this, but as I was getting rid of the packaging for the rest of the review, I saw the render on the side of the box and I realized it looks significantly better than the figure. He's maybe 5% wider, 10% wider there than he is here. Look at the heads. You're not going to be able to tell like that because you're on camera and it doesn't work like that, but look how much wider that head is than that head. Not just bigger because the image is slightly bigger, but wider. Look at how much wider his chest is. How much better that render looks. Oh, okay. Anyway, okay, you know what? We're going to talk about this now too. I can't help it. Everybody's going gaga, from what I can tell. I've read my comment section and I've looked around on Instagram and things like that. Everybody seems to really like this blob figure, and there's a lot of good stuff about it. Notice a difference? That looks like a comic book character with crazy proportions, and he's supposed to be super fat. His head's still small. You know, looks like the Blob. This looks like a regular fat guy in cosplay. Seriously, no joke. I've known people who are like 500 pounds. This is what they look like. This doesn't look like a guy who weighs almost 1,000 pounds and is drawn like he's way bigger than that. So I'm just going to get that out of the way. I'm disappointed in the fact that they made this a fairly realistic looking person. We'll get into that. Okay, let's just do the review. This guy stands just over 8 inches, which does mean he's out of scale because Marvel Legends are larger than 1/12 scale, and he's supposed to be 8 feet tall. And he's not big enough to be Marvel Legends 8 feet tall. It's going to put him at just about 20.5 centimeters. Here he is up against everybody's favorite Darwin. Like, he's big, definitely, but he's not that big. And I could even get away with the height. Like, that's fine. I'll give it to him, but it looks like a regular person in a costume. Honestly, this does not look like somebody who is inordinately fat due to mutant powers. It just looks like a fat person. Seriously. Turn on TLC. Every Thursday night, you'll see somebody that looks like this. It's like, it doesn't look like a comic book character other than the goofy costume. Okay, let's do a comparison. Here's the old one, the old Build-A-Figure, who is a little bit taller. I don't know what happened. I took mine out of my storage bin, and the yellow pigment in his hair, I guess, is leaching or bleeding out somehow and turning his face yellow. So I have to see if I can do something about that. Not significantly taller, but much broader, much more stylized, much more comic looking. Yes, it's dated. You can see the articulation in certain ways that doesn't look good. But I'm thinking there's at least something to having a very stylized action figure that looks like a comic book character rather than just a fat guy in a unitard standing on your shelf. There's something to it. We'll talk about that more as we go. Let's go ahead and do a quick question of the day. If you are a Marvel Legends collector, or if you even just watch enough of my Marvel Legends reviews to answer this, how do you guys feel about Hasbro's approach to making everything look like a regular person in a costume rather than a comic book character? Even in the facial details, this looks like a regular old person. It looks like a normal standard human. It's fairly, like, relatively quite realistic. That's about as realistic a head sculpt as Hasbro has ever done, not counting the fatness, but even then, like I said, he's not that fat. So, what are they going for? Are they trying to create a line of comic book character action figures that just look like what you'd find at San Diego Comic-Con as you're walking around? I don't mean fat people, I mean people in costumes. This does not strike me as somebody with superpowers. It just looks like a big fat guy. Am I the only one seeing that? I don't get it. Okay, so that aside, let's talk about what they did here. This is molded plastic, so that looks good. This is molded plastic, it seems, so that looks good. The wristbands are painted yellow, and they look like crap. Not even close to the same yellow because they're not opaque. There's blue coming through. Same thing up here on the shoulders. The paint job is horrible. It's lined up well enough, but it's not opaque at all. The blue is coming through all over the place. This side is especially bad. Looks terrible. $60 price point, just about? I'm not seeing it. Oh, they sprayed freckles all over him to make him look realistic. Well, okay, that helps. That's a nice touch. But is it enough? I'm thinking it's not, because there's no paint anywhere else, really. They did the paint job for the face, the yellow lines here, the freckles, and then a wash in the hair, which is, like, that's fine, but not $60 fine. That's nuts. That's nuts. And you might say, well, I never got the Build-A-Figure blob, and it costs $150 now. Okay, that doesn't make this worth it, is all I'm saying. This is not a $60 figure so far. It doesn't look like the character, really. And it's like the paint job that is there is bad, other than the freckles and the face, which is hyper-realistic and weird. I mean, it's a good sculpt, but it's so weird. It's so hard to review these Marvel Legends now because they're just not making what they should be in like a general sense. They're not comic book characters. It's like some AI artist, I use that term very loosely, just made up characters that are supposed to be comic book characters but don't look like it. It's so weird. It's so weird. Aesthetically speaking, I have to talk about this alternate head because this plays into the whole thing about making everything look super realistic. His mouth is comically large, no pun intended, which would be fine if the rest of the figure had comical proportions. Comical in the sense that it's based on the comics. Based on comics. Ridiculously large, wide body, smaller head, large hands, that kind of thing. Not regular human body. This mouth is bigger than the rest of his head put together, just about. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but it's freaking huge. It's unrealistic. It doesn't make any sense up against the realistic body. The design philosophy for these figures is getting just weird. I'm going to give this guy an aesthetic rating of, not counting the fact that it doesn't have the comic nature to it, I'll go 8 out of 10. He's still not big enough, and the paint job is bad, but the rest looks pretty good. Counting the fact that it doesn't have the comic nature, 5 out of 10. 5 out of 10. Honestly, I'll take this, despite its flaws, from a million years ago. How old is this? 2006. I'll take this from a million years ago on my shelf over this. Yes, if you look up close and look at the joints, it looks cheap and weird because it's from a million years ago. But standing in your collection, that looks more like a comic book character than this. This is some uncanny valley weird thing going on. I don't know what it is exactly that's going on at Hasbro, but I'll take that over that, just from a design perspective. Okay, let's get into the accessories. You already saw the neutral head and the yelling head. We do have those. We also have 2 fist hands and 2 open hands. One is kind of a grippy hand, but not really. So there's that. 5 out of 10 for accessories. Okay, let's talk about the articulation. The head is on a single ball peg, but it works well because of the roundness, the spherical nature of his jowls. You can actually use that really well. That works nicely, so good job there. Shoulders. They go up to horizontal, so that's okay. Notice, though, I want to point this out. I didn't mention this in the aesthetic. His arms aren't even very big. They don't really look that fat. They just don't have any muscle definition or sculpt, really. So they look a little bit fat in this direction. But from this direction, they're very narrow. Very, very strange. So they do go out to the side. As far as rotation goes, that's fine, too. No bicep swivel. Naturally, we get a single jointed elbow, $60 figure. That's okay. I guess you get about 90 degrees, and you get your rotation right there too. Not the best looking thing in the world. I'd take a bicep swivel over that just about any day of the week. So that's passable. No swivel up there, of course you don't need it, but you do get your swivel at the wrist, and then there's a hinge there, so that's fine. His diaphragm joint, how does that work? You would think it would work really well. He's basically a ball with a thing on top, being this upper torso. It should have loads of range. Let's see if it does. Going to the side is decent. Somewhat awkward looking, but decent, so that's okay. Side to side is fine. Rotation is fine. Going back, you don't really get to go back at all. Like, he's barely even leaning back, if at all. You might even leave it in that position for him to be standing straight up. So he doesn't go back at all. And then going forward, that's it. he has virtually, not virtually, but he has very little range. I was gonna say virtually no range. Very, very little range for no real reason. I'm curious, just out of curiosity, let's see what kind of range this guy has. Oh, it just rotates. Okay, well, it's a sign of the times. So it just rotates, so if you are comparing ranges, you'll have less. But this guy does have a bicep swivel, so hey. All right. Let's talk about the hips. This is something I'm really pleased with. If you were looking at this, not knowing what kind of range it had, you would think that his thighs would bump into his pelvic area right away and he'd have very little range. But they did what I've been saying they need to do on all their figures, and that is locate the pivot point, locate the ball in the right spot for the proper range. Despite how this looks, you can get his legs up to almost horizontal. Like, I know he's still fat, you can't do that much with it, but they put the pivot low enough that when you rotate the leg, it actually brings it out properly. So that's awesome. I like that. He has really good range going forward, a little bit going back, and then going out to the side. Better than like half the Spider-Man figures, and it's the freaking Blob, despite it, he's relatively slender for the Blob. Look at that. Really good range in the hips. All because they put the ball peg where it belongs. That's something. Alright, thigh swivel is fine. Single jointed knee, not the best looking thing in the world, not the best range. It'll be okay. That's about all I can say about that. You do get rotation out of it, like technically, but not practically, so I wouldn't count on it. Ankles go back a little bit. They go forward a little bit, and you get a decent ankle rocker. So articulation-wise, he's okay. It's not particularly good. The neck's good. The hips are good. Elbows are limited, obviously, by the bicep area. Torso's more limited than it needs to be. Knees are okay. Ankles are okay. I'll give it a 7. This isn't like anything special at all. It's run-of-the-mill Marvel Legends. For $60, I figured they'd have tried a little harder, especially, like, they just gave you so little range in the torso. It's so limited. I don't get it. I don't get it. Alright, final thoughts on this guy. For $60, or just about, including tax, let's say $60, no freaking way. If you're going to compare it against $150 for the old Build-A-Figure from 2006, then sure, but that's a weird way of figuring that. That's totally predatory. That's not the way you determine pricing now. This is not a $60 figure. No freaking way. Why is this not a Build-A-Figure? Why did they not make it a Build-A-Figure? Because they're already charging Build-A-Figure prices for standalone figures, guys. That's what's happening. And then they're selling you the Build-A-Figures as deluxe parts, or as deluxe figures. So you're paying for this, and then you're paying the full Build-A-Figure figure price for the standard releases. So we're getting not what we're paying for from the Hasbro company for Marvel Legends. The Hasbro company. That's how I talk now. So yeah, there's definitely some good stuff going on here. If you like the more realistic look, then knock yourself out. You're gonna love it. But to me, I want my comic book figures to look like comic book characters. This really doesn't. If it wasn't for the costume, you would just think it's a fat guy. Hell, it's hardly any bigger. I mean, I know it's a bigger figure, but then that Santa Claus figure I reviewed, in terms of like the belly and stuff, if it was the same size, it's just not what it should be. I'm gonna give it a final rating of a generous 7 out of 10 for $60. Get the heck out of here. I don't think so, Hasbro. I don't think so at all. That's not the Blob. That's just a fat guy in a Blob costume. There it is, guys. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. And if you haven't subscribed, you should. I have new videos almost every single day and thousands already on the channel. So make sure you come back for all of that. In the meantime, keep collecting.